welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTB World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the Prime Minister's launch of Uraan, which is Pakistan's transformation plan towards economic recovery. And this is, of course, extremely important in terms of what the Prime Minister has said in his first day in office. In fact, in terms of a Charter of Economy, in terms of the need to focus on the transformation with regards to economic recovery, and also, of course, in terms of the kind of challenges that we have faced in the past a couple of years. And then, of course, with reference to the IMF. This is important in particular when we talk about the way forward and the way that, of course, the Finance Ministry, our bailout package with the IMF, and then, of course, with the way that the international economy is also unfolding, is going to pan out for Pakistan and what Pakistan aims to achieve in this regard. At the same time, of course, it's very, very important to understand whether or not we have a true framework, a plan of action, a direction in place to actually follow that retains the consistency with reference to the Finance Ministry, and then, of course, with reference to other institutions in the country as well, and whether or not we can have the synergies that one can hope for and the consistencies of policies that one also aims to achieve when it talks about such large-scale and long-term plans. And that, of course, remains to be seen. But so far, of course, we have seen that this plan, which is called Uraan, is being launched. And this, of course, is very, very important in order to understand the struggle that Pakistan is going through, and we're moving forward with particular sectors and areas in which, of course, is going to be a lot of focus of the government and its relevant departments. And so we're going to try and understand what that means in terms of the plan in itself. Then also place it in the context of Pakistan, both in terms of the law and order situation with the rise in terrorist activities in the country and what Pakistan, of course, has been putting up against. And then also in terms of the political realm, the kind of stability that is needed to ensure that we indeed move towards a path of economic recovery. So that's going to be our focus in the discussion today, and we'll try to understand this plan further and then, of course, put it into context. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Dr. Jasim, Anwar is a development expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasim, for joining us and being a part of our discussion today. And we're going to be, of course, focusing with reference to this particular package and try and understand what the future holds. And Farrukh, I'm going to start with you in terms of what your initial feedback and initial reading of this particular abstract is. We have the document on the Planning Ministry's website. We have a certain idea of course, what it entails and the kind of sectors it focuses on. What is your perspective in terms of how it actually can help us towards a path of economic recovery?
Thank you, Sana. Thank you very much for the question. I think that it is important to remember that Pakistan in the past used to have a 5-year plan, and every 5 years we would actually perform well. It was so effective, and it was said that even South Korea at one point borrowed our 5-year plan. But then somehow, because we were focused more on our fiscal annual issues, we abandoned the concept of a 5-year plan. Now we see, because the many aspects of our economy are normalizing, our inflation has come down incredibly. And similarly, our interest rate seems to be going down as well. Because of that, there is this ambition that the country can really set itself up on the road to not only recovery, but this ambitious target of achieving the GDP growth up to $1 trillion in next 5-6 years. That is ambitious, but there is a lot of hope as well. The government wants to actually go for growth, 6% growth within 5 years. That in itself does not actually seem that kind of ambitious, but the other aspects are very important, right? Reviving IT industry at a time when our our internet slows down, that is something to watch. Then, of course, when you talk about improving our exports, in that context also, what the country actually needs is to diversify its portfolio, so to speak. We keep on exporting the traditional things, textiles, commodities, agricultural products, but we haven't actually gone for high value industries, and there perhaps we need to focus more where we can add value. This is the age of microprocessors, India has actually made a huge gamble on this. We also need to actually look into that sector. Similarly, manufacturing on many aspects can be very useful. So in coming days, what we need to do is actually focus on these ideals, these goals, and then focus on delivering them. Of course, there has to be monitoring, there has to be follow through, and that's why the Prime Minister said that this plan is so important, because the country needs to follow through on its promises to itself, not only to the external lenders or the world itself.
Right. And Faisal, I want to know what essentially is the plan, because there is a lot of discussion around what the plan hopes to achieve or the areas in which it focuses on. And we have the 5 E's, of course, that we'll explore further as the show goes on. But in terms of what exactly will be the direction that this plan is going to take, the steps that the government or the relevant institutions are going to take to actually achieve that, that roadmap still needs to exist in order for us to make sure that this actually works, and that this is not just another plan in spirit or in essence only, but also in action. Is that there?
Yes, there is there. And I think, Sana, when we talk about Uraan, Pakistan, of course, this program coming at this hour, I think it is the right and suitable time for it, because we know that SIFC has already been working in all of the sectors.
Yeah.
And right now, the platform is provided by SIFC, and the challenges which we always used to consider that there are challenges, they have already been addressed by SIFC. If we look into Pakistan's economy in recent years, of course, we know that there were lots of challenges, but somehow SIFC's inclusion and introduction for bettering our economy, I mean, that has been pivotal. And when we, of course, talk about Uraan Pakistan, it encircles around increasing the exports of Pakistan, be it IT sector, be it mining, be it agriculture, and all of the sectors, they are interlinked. And somehow I think when we talk about the estimates which are being made, that this is the project, and that's how we are, of course, going to double the exports. I think it is achievable if we deeply dig into Pakistan's IT export potential, and at the same time the kind of efforts which were being put by SIFC in recent times, and in which we know that if we talk about the mining sector, Pakistan has already been putting extra emphasis in the mining sector, number one. And number two, when we talk about agriculture sector, Sana, in of course recent times, the emphasis is being put on introducing the agri-tech in Pakistan to, of course, enhance the crops of Pakistan. And in this way, I'm pretty much sure that in coming years, as we are obviously talking about the 5-year plan, this plan will of course be achievable only the way the steps which are already been taken by SIFC. And when we, of course, talk about our IT export, we have time and again highlighted in our show that Pakistan is a country having a huge youth bulge, and youth that is attracted towards the IT sector. And in recent past, of course, we know that IT boom within Pakistan has generated, I mean, there are so many avenues in the IT sector that needs to be explored. And at the same time, of course, the ideas the youth can come up with, that would be an extra mile achieved by Uraan Pakistan itself. Because when we talk about Pakistan's opportunity in this sector, of course, we have always addressed this as Pakistan has huge potential, but we are still earning around $2.7 or $2.8 billion worth of IT related exports a year. Whereas if overall we look at the picture of Pakistan, Pakistan has the potential of earning more than $50 billion. I'm not saying that within a year we will be achieving that mark, like IT exports getting crossing $50 billion a year. But if we set the targets, like let's say if in the first year we are just going ahead to double the existing IT exports, and with every year, if we keep on working on this, and all of the universities are involved, as we have time and again highlighted that Pakistan's universities, especially in the IT sector, they need to, of course, mend their stance and ways of thinking in terms that the education needs to be further fixed. They are already very good, but of course there are certain avenues they need to look into as well. All of these factors, they will be playing a positive role. Once they play the positive role, there is no reason for Pakistan to be stranded somewhere.
Right.
All of the plan, it can be achieved, and of course with the existing exports of $30 billion, we can achieve 60. It's not a big deal at all, which is being planned to be achieved by Pakistan. And existing exports plus extra emphasis on IT sector, and then agriculture sector with inclusion of agri-tech. Of course, Pakistan would be able to get more crops, and the kind of emphasis which was being employed on the mining sector, I'm pretty much sure all of the plans, they can be achieved.
Right. And let us also welcome in the discussion Dr. Jasim Anwar, who's joined us online. And we've also been joined by Dr. Sajid, Amin, who's the Deputy Executive Director, STPI. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. Dr. Jasim, I'm going to start with you with your perspective on Uraan and the kind of emphasis that we have seen in terms of the ways in which we're actually going to move forward with economic recovery. It's not the first time that we've heard about conversations with regards to a framework towards a path of economic recovery, towards a charter of economy, towards something that needs to be put in place in order for the country to flourish. But what exactly does that mean on ground in terms of actual implementation, and what part of this plan is going to ensure that, in light of what we haven't really achieved in the past, in light of what we see in terms of the kind of turmoil that the country has been into, the fact that there isn't a lot of consistency in policies, the fact there isn't a lot of implementation?
Well, thank you so much, Sana, for having me in this very crucial discussion. So let me structure my comment and add into this debate in two ways. Number one is the alignment of the 5E framework, 13th 5 years plan for public sector development program, and the provincial development plan. So that's the number one prerequisite of having impactful work at the ground level. So that has been already taken care of the current government, as well as some work was done by the previous government as well. But majority, the concept originates by Professor S.N. Iqbal, Minister for Planning. So that's one aspect, is alignment. The other aspect is looking into the areas, the bottlenecks that actually were pulling down the GDP growth and the required employment rates, and reduction of the inflation, as well as having the foreign direct investment. So if you look at that in the 5E framework, I will go one by one very briefly for the viewers and listeners' understanding. Is one is export. In export, you must all be hearing that we are working to improve the export. Now, the bottlenecks in the export is your cheap energy, availability of cheap energy, number one. Number two, developing the export standards, quality assurance standards, so that the market is increased and the demand is increased by the external, vendors or orders or international markets. So this 13th 5 year plan give directions and give a strategic steps in how the government is doing this and will be done to have the export surplus in next 2 to 3 years. So that's one angle. Now, each one of these five pillars are interconnected by way that, now if I give example, services contributes a lot in GDP in many countries. those countries who have have sustained their financial growth, GDP, and enjoying the quality services, have a big share of the services industry. When you come down to Pakistan, in service industries, roughly I think 50-60%. And if you further break it down to females, this proportion is very, very low. So then the question comes how the woman will be empowered, which is also another Pakistan empowering youth, and within the youth is empowering those who are marginalized, like Balochistan, some other areas, as well as empowering the women to increase their employment rates and labor participation in the formal economy, as well as having measures that increase women financial inclusion, especially the remote areas. So these two steps, we have seen significant growth, as well as strategies and the plans are being implemented by the current ministries and the provincial government. Adding on to how the woman will contribute towards the export, especially focusing the IT and the sectors that are in need, is through e-commerce support center, business innovation centers, universities, innovation incubation centers, and many such micro financing initiatives that will improve the inclusion of the women.
Absolutely, but Dr. Jasim, what I want to understand is how is that different from what we already have in place, from the institutions, from the infrastructure, from organizations such as the NICs that you're mentioning, or others that are already in place. How is Uraan going to add value to that or be different than that? And the larger how also in terms of what we hope to achieve, the kind of targets that this plan actually sets, what really are the steps that we're going to take in that direction?
And Dr. Jasim, let me add to your burden. Since we are talking about these goals, let me ask you about the governance issues, systemic governance bottlenecks, especially given that we have a colonial type bureaucracy which has its limitations, especially in sparsely populated areas like Balochistan. How do you propose to take care of that problem, sir?
Well, thank you so much for supporting the comment and giving me indication of the question and answer that you are expecting. Let me clarify two things. The challenge the current government may face is the provincial engagement and having a political coordinated effort in all provinces, resolving the governance issues, adding transparency and trust, supported by the political stability. So these 5-6 things are the enablers that will ensure the success of Uraan Pakistan. For that, the PM office as well as certain ministries, SIFC, that will ensure the success of Uraan Pakistan. For that, the PM office as well as certain ministries, SIFC, are very closely working with the provincial governments to have their say and understand their needs using the equity lens defined in the 5-year framework. So that's one aspect of having a coordinated approach for what is needed by the provinces and realizing the need to work together, especially when we are in the IMF package. You are all aware of the circumstances that we've been through, and now this is the time to work together. So that's the engagement plan. The other one is having improved governance through digitalization. So what the government is doing and what I'm aware of is having all the financial transactions using information systems, artificial intelligences to dig out the gaps, as well as having transparency assuring across all the concerned line ministries and the departments. Third is bringing the right brain and right human skill set. So this government is bringing experts across the world, having the highest training, highest experiences, and the potential to contribute, as well as engaging a broader diaspora, as well as the national and international business communities, consultants, communities, societies, international organizations, multilateral, bilateral, and UN agencies, and also academia to work together to solve those bottlenecks. And all of these actions are being taken place in the province because, the federal has its own limitations after 18th Amendment in terms of, implementation of some programs and the deliveries. But yet, this is being taken care of through a very close engagement with the provincial government. Yes, Sana.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Sajid, Amin, I'd like to come to you now with reference to this plan that, of course, has been put forward, and particularly in terms of the 5Es, we see that while that they're very, very important in terms of what has been selected, in terms of export, in terms of an e-Pakistan environment, energy and equity, and other areas, which of course are very, very important in the country, and understand that that's where the government seems to be focusing on as well. But I want your take in terms of how exactly will these particular areas be targeted, and what will be different in terms of who will actually be dealing with these particular areas? What will be the plan of action in terms of the roles that the government or the SIFC or the finance ministry or other relevant institutions are going to play in this regard that they're already not doing?
And by the way, Dr. Saab, how realistic is the target of reaching $1 trillion GDP by 2035?
Thank you, Sana and colleagues. I think half of my answers you have already taken. In Pakistan, plans are very good always. I mean, we are really good in developing some good plans.
Yeah.
We have done it in past, and we have done it yet another time. I think the key question to me, it's good on paper, what we have to do. And I think one key contribution that I think this plan is making is it's re-envisioning the focus on growth. Unfortunately, we have had so many crises that the stabilization club has strengthened in Pakistan. The growth is now a forgotten objective. I mean, we celebrate the 2.5% of GDP growth rate in a country with 2.55% of population growth rate. That is the shift of the focus from the growth. So I think this plan is bringing that focus back. But this is where the question comes, how to do it. I think any plan is as good as its action plan to implement it is. We need a very detailed action plan that how this Uraan Pakistan will be implemented. And it's not for the sake of criticism. I really genuinely want this Uraan Pakistan program to be implemented. But the first and foremost condition is a very clear plan, action plan that how it will be implemented. For example, going to 6% of growth rate or 9% of growth rate. I mean, we know that there is always a crisis whenever you touch 5% growth rate. What will be the action to cool down the economy once it touches upon the 5% growth rate or 6% or 7%? To me, that will design and that will define how well we will be achieving the target. I mean, in terms of also the Farrukh asks how realistic are the targets. I think there is now approach in policy taking that generally we sort of inflate the targets a bit up from the real target so that at least it's like SDG's agenda. I mean, they put up front so much high target that even if you meet half of it, you are good doing. So I think there are some targets that are in this plan to me are a bit inflated upward. And if we can make 70 to 80% of these targets, we will be on a good track. So number one, we need action plan. Number two, I think the analysis, there are colleagues speaking before me, it's very complicated recipes. I mean, these are the recipes, those haven't worked in 70 years. For example, having a surplus exports. If it is a precondition, it's a non-starter. We haven't had it in 70 years. So let me give you 3 to 4 simple steps that at least we need to start with this work. I mean, this Uraan Pakistan plan towards implementation. Number one, very clear realization that we have to have structural reforms if we need to implement this plan. Without structural reforms, in governance, in bureaucracy, it will not work. Number two, we have to have a very strong political ownership of this plan. Largely, we have now from the provinces, at least in the document, but I think the political commitment from the ruling party still needs to be more visible on this one. And if I can suggest you one advice that the government should do to at least start implement IMF program in letter and spirit. That will be the first test that how committed the government is to take this Uraan Pakistan forward. Because the amount of reforms, the nature and scale of reforms required to implement this Uraan Pakistan program is much more difficult than implementing IMF program. If we can implement IMF program in letter and spirit, so this will be our first test to moving towards this, implementing this plan. So overall, I'm looking forward for a very clear, well-designed action plan to implement this Uraan Pakistan. I mean, the targets can be a bit inflated, they can be adjusted. You know, always plans are flexible. They set the upper bound of the targets and then going forward, they keep adjusting. So I'm not worried about the targets that are set there. To me, it is the road to achieve those sets. That is slightly missing. How will we be moving on that road? What are the milestones? Government should sort of have very clear annual key performance indicators. And this will tell you that how we are on the roads. For example, with IMF program in next 3 years, we may not be able to achieve that. Because if you are taking the tax reforms, they will be slowing down your economy. So achieving 6 to 9% growth rate in next 3 to 4 years, of course, is not achievable and we should not target for it. We need to consolidate the foundations. And I think this IMF program, as I'm saying in repeated programs, that this is a slightly different IMF program. Not in a way that IMF changed, in a way that the conditions in which we are starting this program. Initially, generally we have seen that when this IMF programs come in, economy goes down, inflation goes up, exchange rate depreciates, interest rate goes up. The trajectory is the upward, adverse trajectory. But this program, thanks to standby agreement, it is starting at a good node. You have trajectories in the right direction. Interest rate is coming down, inflation is coming down, exchange rate is stable, growth is picking up. So I think if we can sort of have a policy coherence, and that I think will be the second most important recipe, that we need to have a very coherent policy. I mean, I was literally trying to play your program on YouTube and I couldn't. Right now, it's so slow, YouTube. So you cannot have a flourishing IT sector if even your internet is not supporting a simple YouTube, watching a TV. So this is where the policy and coherence can be a challenge. So I think government's first challenge will be to have a coherent policy. They have identified targets, let's say IT sector, priority, but then policy needs to be coherent. We have to have uninterrupted, affordable, sustainable, predictable supply of internet. You cannot do the both same time, moving in opposite direction. So I think the policy coherence will be the second challenge, and third, of course, political stability or instability, either way. So overall, I'm sorry I've taken too much time, but just overall, the plan, as always, is good plan because they are designed. They are designed in a way that they are the good plans.
Dr. Sajid, yeah, Dr. Sajid, I'm glad that you have highlighted all of these obviously points, very important points. But I have a question related to, of course, you've highlighted the action plan that, of course, if we want to increase the growth of our economy, of our industries, that of course would require the investments. Are we talking about foreign direct investments that would be involved in increasing the size of the industry so that growth can be increased as well, and eventually we can export more? Or we are seeking the domestic investment to be increased?
To me, I think the right signal will be the domestic investment. You know, in Pakistan, we have always targeted, and this is where our policy is fixated, to have sort of strategic FDI. The FDI is coming from the friendly country, from the Gulf, from the China, and from other regions. But I think to get the signal right, it will be the domestic investment that should be followed by the FDI. The kind of investments that SIFC is focusing, they take some time. The larger investment, the strategic FDIs, they will be taking time. I mean, you don't see that next year we will be having sort of the flow of the FDI. Any foreign direct investments, those who are the large investors, they see your economy, the efficient economy. So I think the next 2 to 3 years, I see it more as a combination of following lead by domestic investments and then followed by the kind, and this is where the role of our private sector will be very handy, even in this plan. I mean, this is how we take private sector on board, how confident the private sector is to invest in the country. So if they are investing in the country, and then they can make sort of, I think we need to go beyond this government-led FDI inflows in the country. This is, we have been practicing 70 years, that it is the government-led FDI inflows, strategic FDI. I think we need to move towards Bangladesh and India's model, where your private sector engages with the global ventures, the global partners, and they bring efficiency-seeking FDI. So this is where we have to go, actually. What I'm saying is that we don't have ideal conditions at this point of time. But if you compare it 3-4 years back, we are slightly better. At least the direction is right. Its thinking is right, policy thinking is right, some of the major macroeconomic indicators, direction is right. We need to be realistic, actually. To me, my only worry is that unrealistic goals, unrealistic approaches, that can be sort of hampering this trend. So first is to be very realistic. Let's step-by-step goals. Let's flourish domestic investments. Let's give policies which promote joint ventures between our global and local investors. So this is how, and also finally, I think we have to pick some leading sectors within the even identified sectors, because I think when we try to identify the sectors, we identify every sector. We have to find 3 or 4 leading sectors and then make a coherent policy towards those 4 sectors, where every policy, from your exchange rate to investment to policy rate and to others, is taking economy towards those sectors. And this is where then you start seeking FDI. Because once you have some efficiency-seeking sectors, which are efficient sectors, then you start having FDI. So to me, FDI will follow the right signal that we give through our economy, at least efficiency-seeking FDI, the private sector FDI.
Dr. Sajid, very quickly, when we talk about the domestic investments, in recent years, there was a tendency of the domestic investors to be investing in the real estate sector, and eventually, of course, we know that if they keep on investing in this sector, plot is not a sort of thing which we can export somewhere or consume. So in this case, don't you think that there should be a cap on the investors not to invest more than it is required in this field, rather they should be investing in growth sectors?
Thank you. I think you cannot direct investors by caps. I mean, it's very difficult. You run investments by incentivizing them. If the returns on my investments are higher in real estate market, I will be investing there, no matter how much caps you do. So I think we need to have a more realistic, this is what I'm repeating again and again. We need to make sure that the returns in manufacturing sector are higher than the real estate sector, number one. We need to bring policy which de-risk the investments in the manufacturing sector. We need to go for more and modern, innovative investment instruments, the financial instruments that needs to be there. I think by putting caps, we have been trying it 7 decades. You cannot have investors by stake. It's more the incentives, the carrots that you, and that comes in the shape of policy. Minimize uncertainties, ensure policy coherence, bring in new and innovative instruments of investment, which generally pool, for example, for the smaller investors. In Pakistan, unfortunately, the policy was mainly focused on the large investors. I mean, our policies are made keeping in mind the Pakistan Stock Exchange 400 firms. We need to have a policy for bringing small investors. And this is, when I say policy, it's not macro policy only. The banking sector, the financial instruments, the incentive structures, they need to be aligned to the small investors because they're in the larger numbers. We have a very small number of large firms. 90+% are the small firms or the medium firms. We need to realign our policy from those larger firms towards the smaller firms, towards the medium firms. And they need altogether a very different type of instruments, financial, investment, other, all instruments. So this is where I think we can bring the local investor to invest in the sectors that we are prioritizing, not by putting caps. Until and unless we give alternatives, real estate sector remains the priority, and we can do to some extent.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Sajid, Amin, for those comments and for joining us in the debate. Dr. Jasim, I'll come back to you with reference to another important aspect, and that's, of course, when we talk about implementation or an implementation plan or to ensure that things happen like Dr. Sajid was mentioning. There is, of course, the aspect of the context and the realities that we live in Pakistan, and that includes, of course, the kind of terrorist activities we've seen in 2024 alone. There has been a report that has come out just recently. There's also, of course, the political situation that we've been, of course, dealing with for quite some time in terms of the kind of consensus that one can hope for, a kind of strengthening of the parliament as we move forward. So while we deal with these particular issues and we have Uraan Pakistan as a plan to move forward towards economic recovery, how are we going to actually achieve that while these two elements are still not in order?
Very much rightly mentioned that the odds and the circumstances are very, very tough when you talk of, achieving very ambitious targets. And I commend my colleague to, highlight the role of domestic financing and the role of private sector. So let me give you only 2 small examples in the best interest of the time. Number one example is so the focus is to improve the export-led economy. So what are the bottlenecks is the access to finances, number one. Number 2 is having access to raw materials and technology transfers, and then right human skill set. So all these 3 aspects are already covered and the action has already been taken. For example, there's an SRO that clearly speaks that there will be a rebate on the machinery export for purposely that is to be being exported for the manufacturing industry, targeting international export. So that's one small act. Another one, engagement of BOIs, Board of Investments, and the creation of the P3A, Public-Private Partnership Authority, that is mandated, and it's an autonomous to engage the private sector, whether domestic or international, share the ROIs of the various feasible projects in Pakistan and create an enabling environment through one window operation so that the ease of business is there for any local or international investor. Adding on to it is your fiscal sustainability. And the fiscal sustainability has various parameters, like we all agree that the macroeconomic indicators are in the line. They are doing better. They are doing better for the last 2 years. So there's no question about that. Now the question is how we continue this growth through adding an efficiency component to our financial allocations. So the financial allocations for the mega projects and for those that are particularly targeting the vulnerable communities and those which are not engaged in the economical, cycles are being focused in collaboration with the provincial governments. So the plans are already being made in place and now are being implemented. But for that, the conducive environment, political stability, provincial ownership and engagement, and obviously having all community engagement as one nation is the basic prerequisite for success of this plan and for that matter any other plan. Yes.
Absolutely, Dr. Saab, I'm glad that you have mentioned so many things. But you earlier mentioned an SRO, a statutory regulatory order. And I, for a long time, because I've been covering finance and I've been also covering planning department, one concern that I've always highlighted is that it is an arbitrary power which has too much power in one department. Otherwise, whenever you have to actually introduce something new, you go for legislation, but SROs undercut that authority. Do you think that in coming days, because we are in the planning stage, should we, let SROs continue, or there should be some checks and balances? The second thing, hang on, sir. Secondly, because we are planning again, these days there is a kind of competition between two models of governance or economic growth. One is national champions, like India has Adani and Ambani. America now has Elon Musk and what have you. Then there is also a European model where you actually go for a robust antitrust regime and you ensure that there is competition rather than champions. Which perspective do you think Pakistan should favor?
This comment, obviously I'm not the spokesman for finance division, but in general, the SRO concept is only for temporary relief, whereas long-term legislative solutions are needed to promote such actions which bring in more external financing. So I totally agree with you that, this is not a long-term solution, but for now, while the political situation is being stabilized and the plans are being made and the legislations are being done, this point is on the table, and the concerned quarters are working, that I'm aware of. I totally agree that, these SROs are not the sustainable solutions. Yes.
Right.
Over.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasim, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, regarding the overall plan, because you earlier, when our guest had not arrived, you actually asked Faisal what exactly is the plan.
Yeah.
And I think these 5 E's, if you look at it, Sana, you will see that there is one central pole, and that central pole is essentially exports. And all the other poles that we talk about, the other 4 E's, Pakistan, energy and infrastructure, then equity, right, and environment. All of them are either the contributories or then they are products of resultant of this. So what essentially we need to do is, push up the exports and keep on exporting more, right? The biggest problem at this moment, and there seems to be a disconnect. For example, the nomenclature itself. Before the day when I saw the flyer of Uraan, Pakistan, I was for a e-flyer. For a second, I thought that perhaps there is an NGO by this name as well for works for women. So I thought that the government is going big on that. But then later on, I understood that planning department has come up with this name for this plan, 5-year plan essentially, right? So there is usually a disconnect between the Q division, building and the P building. P building is for planning division, and then Q is for finance. I think that while we have to actually look, dream big, we have to keep it simple. That means essential components that we have to look at. Now, the governance issue that I highlighted earlier, especially because Dr. Jasim was talking about, education in far-flung areas and bringing women into the educational fold as well. I was reminded of an interaction and an experience I had last year when I was in Quetta. We went to various places, far-flung Balochistan area, where in one sort of village, where you usually see that there are schools, and those schools are not populated because there's not enough population of people there, right? There was a university sitting there. So I asked, what exactly is it about? They said that the local MNA had promised that he is going to open a university if he wins. And there's no staff, there's no students, right? And yet he got the approval, and there's a building standing over there. The question then is our systemic governance bottlenecks, because our bureaucracy has been working great, but unfortunately when it comes to monies that are given to them, they usually cannot even properly spend them, and they lapse by the year's end. So you have to have some shake-up of the system. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you very much, Faisal, for joining us and being part of the discussion. As always, that's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.